يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب عليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أتخذوا من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محذرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون. وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا شريك لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين. وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون. وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين. وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أحد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمره ننقصه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقا قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون سورة فاتحة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله ملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولله الحمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين علي ولي الله. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين علي حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير الأعمال حي على خير الأعمال. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم اجعل قلبي بارا وعملي سارا وعيشي كارا ورزقي دارا وأولاد أبرارا واجعل عند قبر نبيك محمد مصطفى صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم مستقرا وقرارا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على خير العمل هيا على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى اللهم صل على محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. هيا على الصلاة، هيا على الصلاة، هيا على الفلاح، هيا على الفلاح، هيا على خير العمل، هيا على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج إمام زماننا وعجل خزي أعداء برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي، فأجول في طلبه البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران، لا أدري أفي سهل هو أم في جبل، أم في أرض، أم في سماء، أم في بر، أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من، وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم صل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا ربي رزقك لي واسعا، ومطلبه سهلا، ومأخذه قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله، وجد على عبدك بفضلك، إنك ذو فضل عظيم.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوسيين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولى وابن مولى، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا سلطان والحسان يا ابن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب النصر والزمان، الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله
صلوات.
گونجی با وقت عصر صدا، میں حسین ہوں. گونجی با وقت عصر صدا، میں حسین ہوں. کا تو نہ میرا خشک گلا، ہائے کا تو نہ میرا خشک گلا، میں حسین ہوں. گونجی با وقت عصر صدا، मैं हुसैन हूँ। अम्मा किसी ने पानी की एक बूंद भी ना दी। अम्मा किसी ने पानी की एक बूंद भी ना दी। मैं बार बार कहता रहा, हाय मैं बार बार कहता रहा, मैं हुसैन हूँ। गूंजी बवक्त असरे सदा, मैं हुसैन हूँ। मुझको कफन नहीं है दिया, ऐ शामियों सुनो। मुझको कफन नहीं है दिया, ऐ शामियों सुनो। दे दो मेरी बहन को रिदा, हाय दे दो मेरी बहन को रिदा, मैं हुसैन हूँ। गूंजी बावक्त असरे सदा, मैं हुसैन हूँ। जानू पे रख के सर को कहा एक ज़ईफ़ ने, जानू पे रख के सर को कहा एक ज़ईफ़ ने, अकबर कहाँ है दर्द बता, हाय अकबर कहाँ है दर्द बता, मैं हुसैन हूँ। गूंजी बावक्त असरे सदा, मैं हुसैन हूँ। गूंजी बावक्त असरे सदा, मैं हुसैन हूँ। सलवात।
सलवात। हाय ज़ैनब लुट रही है, ए अज़ीज़ों तुम कहाँ हो। हाय ज़ैनब कहाँ हो सूए कूफा जा रही है ए अजीजों तुम कहाँ मेरे हाशिम के जवानों जुल्म से हम को बचाए नो के नेज़ा सज चुकी है बीबियों की ओढ़े दाए हम पे हर शे रो रही है ए अजीजों तुम कहाँ हो हमको दुरों से बचाए कोई तो सुन ले नोहा दश्ते गुरबत कर रही है आज हम पर खुद भी गिरिया मेरी दुनिया लुट गई है ए अजीजों तुम कहाँ हो जिसको महमिल में सजा कर लाए थे मैं हुसैन अपनी निगरानी में रख कर लाए थे मैं हुसैन आज तन्हा हो गई है ए अजीजों तुम कहाँ हो मेरे बाबा मक़तल रोके देती है सदा मेरी सकीना खाक पे सो ना सकी है ए अजीजों तुम कहाँ हो बेक जावा ऊँटों पे है Zahra रो रही है ए अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो हाय ज़ैनब लुट रही है तुम कहाँ हो सलवात
बर मोहम्मद इनवाल मोहम्मद सलवात Brothers, sisters and children, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today is the Dusmo night here at Masjid Husayn, Leicester, and today I only have 3 announcements. Number 1 is Jamaat Namaz, so Zohar, Asr and Maghrib Isha Namaz will commence here from the center from tomorrow. All of you are encouraged to attend. Number 2 is Leicester Boys Cycling Sportive for the Ali Asghar Water Appeal. So we just recently had Ghulam Mehdi Sumar recently give us a talk on the Ali Asghar Water Appeal and what they've been doing. So in partnership with Stanmore Jaffries and the World Federation, Alhamdulillah, a group of riders from Leicester Gent Cycling Group are taking part in this year's annual cycling sportive, which covers a total of 62 miles. It's going to be held on the 12th of September in London. The event aims to better provide access of water, build long-term sustainable water solutions across the world for water-scarce community. So the Leicester Gents Cycling Group requests you to make a pledge, support them, and help those who can achieve a better standard of living and provide them with this basic human right. Donations can be made speaking to a member of the Treasury team, and I will be sharing further details on the WhatsApp messaging service tomorrow. Number 3 is the Muharram feedback. As communicated, the MC also wanted to share the feedback results to you all. We had a terrific 102 responses. And if you take a look at the screen on the projector, we can go through them quickly just so you know what everyone responded. So you can see the first question was, how did you find the Muharram atmosphere in the masjid? So overwhelmingly, 65% of respondents were very pleased, and 24%, obviously 23% were in the good category. So I think we did well there. If we move to the next section, how did you find the quality of our programs? Again, we had a whopping 58% that really liked it, and a 33% that found it good as well. Next one was, how was your overall experience and service you received from the volunteers when you attended this year's Muharram program? Again, this was a big number, 77% were very pleased with that. So if you move on to the next one, how did you find the audio and video service, including our live stream? Again, there was a good respondent right there at 60%. And then the length of the programs, this was a little bit split actually. So you could see that 40% or 39% thought it was okay, 30% thought it was good, and 30.4% thought it was very good. And then the final question, I think it is how did you find the service with regards to Niyaz and Tabarruk? Again, number 3 trumped it with 61%, very good. Oh no, there is one more as well. How did you find the COVID-19 safety measures during the 12 nights of Muharram? And again, number 3 trumped that one as well at 57.8%. And then we had a lot of responses. As you can see, there were 67 responses on the actual open questions. So what I'll do is I'll just go through the common themes. So the first question was, are there any areas you feel we did well on and would like us to continue with? And the three I've written down here are the quality of lecturers and reciters from both the ladies and gents sides. So that was something we'll continue to do, inshallah. The COVID procedures was another one. I think attendees appreciated the COVID safety measures that we put in place. And then thirdly, there was the volunteers and service received. That came across a lot in the feedback as well. So thank you very much for all those that put those comments down. The second part of the question was, are there any areas you feel we can improve on to increase the quality of the programs? Again, we had a number of responses, over 60 responses, but the main ones were length of program, as you've seen on the result. Just wanted you guys to know that the management committee also believed the length of the program should be moderately reasonable, not too short and not too long. And we will be reviewing this in our next MC meeting, inshallah, next week. And we'll see how we can implement that next year. The next point that came across was the frustration regarding the ticketing system. So again, we'll look into that, but we did do capacity planning for the safety of the community. That's why we had to limit the numbers. If tickets are sold out, then it means that we have reached capacity, and we did announce this every night. Now, individuals are accountable and responsible for their own actions after we announce it, and it's not really we couldn't control that. So we'll look into that, inshallah, next year. Hopefully we won't need it next year. The next one was, the other thing I think Samir Rajani, the president, Brother Samir, wanted to say is that he wanted to appreciate for those who did the right thing from not coming and keeping the community safe. He just wanted to pass on the message that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them abundantly, and inshallah next year we will no longer require this system, so we can all be present at the masjid. La ilaha min. And then the last one that I picked up on was the healthier tabarruk. A lot of comments came in around tabarruk. Again, the management committee's objective is to give out healthier tabarruk, and we'll be introducing this gradually. We are going to be asking community members who wish to give tabarruk to give money instead, and then inshallah the ladies subcommittee will organize the tabarruk. So we are looking at ways, we are listening. So again, finally, we would like to thank each and every one of you that participated in the survey. Your input is valuable, and we will discuss the outcomes of the feedback in our next MC meeting. So don't worry, your voices are being heard. Okay, so it's now time for tonight's Majlis. Tonight's Majlis is sponsored for the following marhumeens. And in fact, they're just going to come up on the board now. Two very special people from Leicester Jamaat, who we miss immensely, Marhum Sajjad Karim and Marhum Abdul Karim Al-Adita. Let's please recite a Surah Fatiha for them. Al-Fatiha. Now can we welcome Sheikh Anwar Jaffer to the minbar with 3 loud salawats, please.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع لذنوبنا وتبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد. والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: قل لا أسألكم عليه الأجر إلا المودة في القربى آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah accept your a'mal and our a'mal jami'an inshallah during these nights of Muharram, gathering, congregating, commemorating the Azza of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. In tonight's discussion, and it's an important discussion that is held amongst the historians and has been held amongst the historians for many centuries, is what are the ramifications and the consequences of the Battle of Karbala. Many a times what we do is we speak about the consequences that led towards Karbala. What transpired in the city of Medina, what transpired in the city of Mecca, and how it all eventually led to the 10th of Muharram. But what now we want to discuss is what happened after the 10th of Muharram. Before the 10th of Muharram, we see that religiosity, we see that the imamah, authority, wilaya was in the hands of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salatu wasalam. He had a responsibility, and that responsibility he carried, and the peak of that responsibility manifested and embodied on the 10th of Muharram. But then after the 10th of Muharram, you find that that responsibility was then transferred to number one, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, and then Bibi, or the Holy Lady Zainab al-Kubra salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alayhi. And both of them carried on the revolution of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam to the extent that their words, their sermons, their behavior, how they manipulated the emotions of the people, how they managed to change the emotions of the people to the extent that just a few decades later you found the whole dismantling of the regime, the Umayyad regime. So now the question arises, what exactly happened? What were the ramifications of Karbala, the consequences of Karbala, and how did it play about after the 10th of Muharram? There are three specific areas that I want to look into, or three specific consequences towards Karbala. The first is how Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was able to distinguish or allow the people to acknowledge that there is a difference between political power, between the Khilafah and religious power, and that both may not necessarily be the same. One may not represent the other. The second consequence of Karbala was to allow the people to understand that what transpired on the 10th of Muharram was not something normal. And the emotions that were conjured up by the speeches delivered by the Holy Lady Zainab and Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, it somehow managed to create a sense of anger, aggression, directed towards the Bani Umayyah. And third, through the movement of Muharram or Karbala, the Imam alayhi salam taught the people how there is a higher purpose in life. So let's examine these three, inshallah. With regards to the first point, we said that the Imam alayhi salam, through the movement of Karbala, managed to explain to the people, allowed the people to acknowledge that there is a difference between political power and religious power, and the two may not necessarily be the same. When you look at, for example, the Bani Umayyah, especially when Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan came into power, naturally he began working on the people on the ground level, on the root. How? Through propaganda. The propaganda machine that he established, there were certain communities that he established, where he began to uphold the values of the Bani Umayyah. And so naturally, he explained to the people through tabligh and constant tabligh, consistently, that the Bani Umayyah, the power of the Khilafah, represent religious authority as well. So many historians in this respect, they came forward and they said that in the Friday sermons, for example, and we've heard this many times before, in the Friday sermons, the Imam would begin the sermon by praising Allah, Tawheed, the way we do, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and then they would send salawat on Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And then naturally after that, they would begin with the la'na on Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, meaning that the natural consequence or the natural sequence of events after believing in Tawheed and Nabuwah was to distance oneself from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And then all of the praises of the Bani Umayyah came in afterwards, which meant here that the Bani Umayyah, they are the representatives of God. They are the manifestations of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we look at, for example, the behavior of Ibn Ziyad, when he comes into the city of Karbala, when he publicly addresses the people of Kufa, he makes it a point to mention that if you want to stand against the Caliph of our time, then you are standing against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the Caliph of the Muslim Ummah, he is the physical embodiment of the will of Allah. If you turn against, or if you turn your back against the Caliph, you are turning your back against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of a sudden, the Bani Umayyah, through this propaganda that they established for themselves, managed to create a religiosity, a sense of piety, a sense of power, religious power for themselves. That whosoever had any thought of standing against the Bani Umayyah, they were standing against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And through this power, they were able to quell all insurrections, all movements against the Bani Umayyah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Naturally, by presenting themselves as religious power, you found that the Bani Umayyah were able to subdue any movement that was initiated against them. The Imam alayhi salam, in this respect, very meticulously combats and fights against the power of the Bani Umayyah. How does the Imam alayhi salam do this? The Imam alayhi salam, they say that when he moves away from Mecca and he goes towards the city of Kufa, Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi interjects. And then they say that Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, when he interjects, he takes the Imam alayhi salam away from the city of Medina. Because initially the Imam wanted to go back to the city of Medina. Hur disallows this. He tells the Imam that you have to go towards the city of Kufa. The Imam says, I have no interest in going towards the city of Kufa. This dialogue that takes place, that goes back and forth between Hur and Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Naturally, what the Imam alayhi salam was doing was explaining to the historians, the people recording all of these events taking place, that the Imam wanted somehow to make sure that there is no bloodshed caused. That the Imam was not interested in battle. Now remember, the Bani Umayyah, as envisaged by the general public, is that they are the religious guidance, that they are the embodiment of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They represent the mercy of Allah in this earth, yes? So if, for example, they were to cause, or they were to go into battle, and they were supposed to slaughter Imam Husayn alayhi salam, knowing that it wasn't a battle in the first place, this would be bad press for the Bani Umayyah. And the Imam alayhi salam recognized this. The Imam, when he began to speak with Hur, he made sure that the historians who are recording these ahadith and recording these interactions taking place, they would write down in their books that the Imam did not want to go into battle. The Imam had no interest in going into bloodshed. But of course, on the other side, we see that Ibn Ziyad and Umar ibn Sa'd and all of these personalities, they were very much interested in shedding blood. So all of a sudden, there's a question mark when it comes to the lineage of the Bani Umayyah, when it comes to the authenticity, or when it comes to the sincerity of the Bani Umayyah. Weren't they supposed to be the manifestations of the mercy of Allah in this earth? Well, why did they go and slaughter Abu Abdullah alayhi salam without mercy? The Imam alayhi salam knew exactly what the Bani Umayyah were, what their intentions were. And he exploited their intentions by sacrificing himself and his family as well. When the caravan came into Kufa, They saw, and when they saw what happened to the bodies of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, when they saw the heads, when they saw how the women and the children were treated, they realized, hold on a second, there's a difference between the political power and religiosity. Because just a few years ago, a few decades ago, we find that the Holy Prophet of Islam was a prophet of mercy, a prophet of discipline, a prophet of principle. And all of a sudden we have his representatives acting in a completely different way. Their message is in opposition to the message of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam knew how to exploit the Bani Umayyah. And in turn, he did so beautifully and very meticulously. Beyond this, look at, for example, what happened in Karbala. First of all, the water was shut off for the Ahl al-Bayt. Not only that, on the 10th of Muharram, the companions were killed. Amongst them, some were elderly. Majority of them were youths. They were slaughtered. Some of them were infants as well, slaughtered mercilessly. It didn't stop there. The bodies were trampled. Then the heads were severed. Then the heads were placed on the spears. Then the heads were paraded in the streets of Kufa. Does this not sound like overkill? It sounds like overkill. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam knew exactly how the Bani Umayyah would respond when they threatened him and his life. The Imam alayhi salam made sure that when he used to sacrifice his life, he would exploit the Bani Umayyah. Because when the people saw how the Bani Hashim and the Bani Alawi were treated, all of a sudden they were asking questions to themselves. How can you have soldiers killing an infant? How can you have soldiers killing a child who is only 8 or 9 years of age? The Imam alayhi salam, through shedding his own blood, yes, and by sacrificing his companions and his sons and his nephews, he made sure that the message were to reach the people of Kufa, explain to the people of Kufa that what happened on the 10th of Muharram was not normal. You believe that the Bani Umayyah are the representatives of Allah? Look what they did on the 10th of Muharram. Does this tell you that they are the representations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will? The Quran tells you one thing, and they go and they act on something else completely different. Their practical behavior is in opposition to the message of the Holy Quran. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Beyond this, you find, for example, on the 10th of Muharram itself, just before the 10th of Muharram, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam has conversations with Umar ibn Sa'ad. When he has conversations with Umar ibn Sa'ad, you find that in these conversations, they try and come up with certain conditions where Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is allowed to live, and likewise Umar ibn Sa'ad is not willing to engage in a battle. They say that all of the conditions were set up. The paper was signed by Umar ibn Sa'ad and as well as Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Then Umar ibn Sa'ad sends a letter towards Ibn Ziyad. He says, look, we've come to a condition, we've come to certain agreements, we won't engage in a battle, there's no need for us to engage in a battle. Ibn Ziyad responds. And all of this has gone down in history. Ibn Ziyad responds, he says, what do you mean? I've sent you towards the city of Karbala to slaughter him. I'm not interested in getting bay'ah from Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Go and slaughter him. That was your job, that was your responsibility. Interestingly, now people will ask the question, did Imam Husayn alayhi salam want bloodshed? Did he want to fight? The answer is no, because he was willing to sit down and talk with Umar ibn Sa'ad. They drew up a whole condition plan, yes, where the Imam alayhi salam was allowed to live, and likewise Umar ibn Sa'ad would not engage in battle. Now the people will ask the question, well, if Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam had no interest in fighting, then how did the opposition react? How did Ibn Ziyad react? How did, for example, Umar ibn Sa'ad react? They reacted, they retaliated with oppression, with aggression. They killed everyone mercilessly. All of a sudden, questions are raised. Hold on a second. If the Bani Umayyah are supposed to be the representations of God on the earth, why are they now behaving opposite to how God would behave? God is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Yes, He is the most merciful, the most compassionate. Aren't the Bani Umayyah manifestations of God's mercy on earth? All of a sudden, the practical behavior of the Bani Umayyah were exposed. It was exposed because of the meticulous decisions made by Aba Abdullah alayhi salam. Every movement that the Imam alayhi salam made, from the moment he left Medina to go towards the city of Karbala, every speech he delivered, every movement he made, every action he took, it exploited the Bani Umayyah. It exposed them for who they were. All of a sudden, the idea that the Khilafah, the political power, are the religious representations of God, it was now slowly being separated. Today, for example, when you look at the Haramain, Mecca and Medina, the Haramain are controlled by whom? The Haramain is controlled by the King of Saudi. Politics has now merged with religiosity. Yes, we say that there is nothing wrong in this if and only if the politics and religiosity is in the hands of the Imam al-Ma'soom. If it's not in the hands of Imam al-Ma'soom, naturally you'll find people will abuse this power and they will do whatever it takes to try and magnify this power that they have within their hands. Whatever happens in Mecca and Medina, in the Haramain, for example, you find that the ultimate decision is made by the king. It's not made by the religious scholars. It's made by the king. If the religious scholars were to turn away from the king, they would easily be replaced. So you found that through Karbala, through the 10th of Muharram, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was able to separate religiosity from politics. They were not one and the same. When the 10th of Muharram took place, the people realized this. Slowly, that respect that the Bani Umayyah were a religious institution was slowly declining in the hearts of the people. They were moving away from the Bani Umayyah. The support was now being, or the support towards the Bani Umayyah was dwindling very, very quickly. Naturally, what happened was, as a natural consequence, the Bani Umayyah were now under damage control. So what they did was they established a religious sect. And this religious sect, they hired certain ulama. These ulama would come, they would issue fatwa, they would issue fatwas amongst the people, and they would say to the people that if you were to turn against the caliph, you are turning against God. The Murji'ah, for example, the Murji'ah is a religious sect that started in the time of the Bani Umayyah. And their responsibility was to engrave the message that religiosity is political power. Whoever is in power religiously, politically, or in power religiously. The Murji'ah were condemned by the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, especially the likes of Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq alayhim salam, that came afterwards. They condemned the Murji'ah. And why the Murji'ah were established. Amongst the opinion of the Murji'ah, very interestingly, they said that whoever stands against the religious authority of the time, or stands against the caliph of the time, specifically the caliph of the time, they have turned their backs on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were known as Baghi. Baghi is the one who stands against the caliph of the time. Hell awaits them. No one had the audacity to stand against the caliph of the time. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu was-salam, the holy Imam alayhi salatu was-salam, interestingly, when he comes to his visions of how a community should be, he says one of the indications of a strong community is when that community is not complacent. When you come forward and you believe that the political power of the time is a religious power as well, it naturally brings about complacency. Especially when that political power is unjust. Amongst our Sunni brothers, for example, today, we have certain evidences from Ahmad ibn Hanbal when he wrote a number of letters to his students and so on and so forth, in which he comes forward and he says it is haram for a person to stand against the caliph of the time. What if the caliph is an unjust caliph? If a caliph is a just caliph and a merciful caliph, then fabiha wa ni'mah, it's good for the people. But what if that caliph is unjust? He said, then you have to bear patience. You as a Muslim, you have to bear patience. Why? Because it is haram for you to stand against the caliph of your time. It is haram to organize an insurrection, a revolt against the caliph of the time. This all began from the time of the Bani Umayyah. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says the worst ailment that a community can go through is complacency. When the people sit back and they take the oppression from the rulers. Complacency means that when a community has no ambition to create change for themselves, a community does not aspire to create change for themselves, there is no driving force to move them to create change, that community will be controlled by the ruling powers. On his deathbed, he turns to Imam al-Hasanain, Imam al-Hasan as well as Imam al-Husayn, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And he says to them, he says, look, when it comes to the Khawarij, don't treat them like the Bani Umayyah. The Khawarij are not like the Bani Umayyah. The Khawarij, they were bad. There's no shadow of a doubt in that. They were criminals. But they are not like the Bani Umayyah. The Khawarij are different. Why? He says because deep down in their hearts, they're searching for the truth. They've shot the arrow and they've missed. They don't know where the truth is, but they're searching for it. Whereas the Bani Umayyah, they do not want to search for the truth. They have no interest for the truth at all. They want to establish sin and licentiousness within the community, and they will do whatever it takes to establish that. If the Bani Umayyah come into power, then what? Then revolt and stand against them. This was the message of the Imam alayhi salam. When you look at, for example, the hadith of the Holy Prophet of Islam, when he speaks about his two grandsons, he says, هَذَانْ أو هَذَيْنَ الْإِمَامَيْنِ قَائِدًا أو قَائِمًا, that these two are the imams. Yes, whether one is standing and the other is sitting, both are imams. Standing and sitting meaning what? Sitting, referring to Imam al-Hasan when he signs the peace treaty. Standing in response to or in relation to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam when he actively engages in a revolt. Revolution, insurrection is part and parcel of the message of Islam, especially when there is a ruler who is unjust. So you found on the one hand, as a natural consequence of people moving away from the Bani Umayyah, having, for example, understanding that the Bani Umayyah are not religious authority, the Bani Umayyah began to issue fatwa saying that whoever stands against the Caliph of the time stands against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in turn, that is haram, which goes against the very fabrics of the message of Islam. So this was the first consequence that the Imam alayhi salam, through the battle of Karbala, was able to distinguish, separate religious power from political power. Number two, the Imam alayhi salam was able to establish grief and anger and aggression in the hearts of the people directed towards the Bani Umayyah. Especially when the women came towards the city of Kufa. When the women and the children came to the city of Kufa and they entered the city of Kufa, the people saw the state of the Ahl al-Bayt. When they saw the shackles around the chains and the shackles around the children, and the heads on the top of the spears, naturally grief had struck their hearts. Now grief had two powerful motives here. Number one, they turned to Allah in tawbah. They knew they could have helped the Imam, but they chose not to. But never had they anticipated that the Bani Umayyah would treat the family of the Holy Prophet in such a way. So they turned to Allah in repentance, and number two, they developed anger and aggression towards the Bani Umayyah. Now the passion of anger and aggression translates to what? Revolutions, insurrections. And this is what happened. There were a number of revolutions and insurrections that took place. But coming back to the discussion, they say that when the captives entered the city of Kufa, naturally the sermons of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, the sermons of Sayyidah Zainab, the sermons of Kulthum, the sermons of Fatima, the daughter of Imam al-Husayn, added fuel to the fire, so to speak. When they saw what happened to the captives and towards the ashab of Imam al-Husayn and his family, they were already grief-stricken. But the sermons given by the Ma'sumin enraged them even further. So you find, for example, the words of Sayyidah Zainab when she turns to them. She looks towards her right and she looks, may Allah never end your tears and may Allah never silence your lamentations and your wails. On the one hand, now she rebukes them, and she uses severe words. She says, on the one hand, you made oaths to support Abu Abdullah and you then turned away from him. You broke your oaths. You deceived yourselves. May Allah extend your mourning, and may He cease your laughter. May you be burdened with shame and dishonor. This shame and dishonor that has now fallen on your shoulders, you will never be able to get rid of this. How can you get rid of this shame and dishonor, knowing that you aided in slaughtering the son or the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi? He says, do you know who you have killed and whose organs you have grinded under the hooves of the horses? Do you know which ladies you have taken as captives? Wallah, the heavens have split open and the mountains have been rendered into particles. When they hear the words of Bibi Zainab speak in such a way, the narrations, they say that it was as if they could hear Ali ibn Abi Talib speaking. The way she spoke, the words that she mentioned, the way she carried herself, it was as if Ali alayhi salam himself was speaking. The elders of the Kufan generations of the time, they acknowledged that these aren't the words of Zainab. These were the words as if Ali himself was talking. Then beyond this, you find Fatima, the daughter of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, then she begins to speak. She says, Wallah, you people of Kufans, you are a people of humiliation and disgrace. Allah tested you through us. You condemned us and you considered us as liars and apostates. You justified in your minds that killing us was permissible. Do you know how many hands gathered on the 10th of Muharram to stab us? How many of you stayed hungry to murder us? How many hearts have hardened from amongst you? Do you not understand what the size of the army was on the 10th of Muharram that gathered in Karbala to slaughter each and every one of us? It says, Wallah, your hearts have hardened. Your eyes are now blocked, your ears are now blocked. You may never see the truth. Satan has misguided you, and you will stay misguided. Again, when they heard these words given to them by Fatima, the daughter of Imam al-Husayn, it added further rage and enmity towards the Bani Umayyah. What happened was this emotion that was created, it begetted revolutions in the future years to come. There was one revolution after another, one insurrection after another. Naturally, the Banu Umayyah saw, what did they see? They saw that there was a lot of what? There was a lot of opposition coming in from different parts of the empire. Naturally, what happened was the people that were there in Karbala, when they returned back to their lands, back to their homes in different parts of the empire, they all narrated the story of what happened. How the women were treated, how the children were treated. Naturally, this affected the people. This is not normal what happened on the 10th of Muharram. It began to create rage and aggression towards the Bani Umayyah. The Bani Umayyah had to retaliate through further oppression. When you read the history of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, when Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi comes in, you find that his aggression towards the people had to heighten. Why? To keep them in control. Because of the rage and the aggression that was developed, directed towards the Bani Umayyah slowly they were losing power. And because they were losing power, their power within the Ummah was slowly being lost from them. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Beyond this, they say that when Zainab and Kulthum and the other captives entered the city of Kufa, try and understand this point. It's a very subtle point, but it's something that has been highlighted by the ulama. When they entered the city of Kufa, when the ladies of Kufa saw the state of the children, they said, the historians say that they began to give these children tamar, dates. Dates. When these children began to place these dates in their mouths, according to some narrations, Zainab alayhi salam, according to some Kulthum, began to take away these dates from the children. And she would turn towards the people of Kufa and say that sadaqah is haram on us, the Sadat. Today we know this because it's part of our fiqh. Yes, the Sadat, there's no sadaqah for them. But they were the first generations of Sadat. Zainab was the first generation of Sadat. It was her highlighting to the people of Kufa, look how close we were towards the Imam, towards the Prophet of Allah. And you've just slaughtered his entire family. You've slaughtered his entire family. When Ibn Ziyad was asked in his courtroom, what would you say to the Prophet of Islam if the Prophet turned to you and said, Ibn Ziyad, what did you do to my family? The narrations say Ibn Ziyad at this moment mocked the Ahlul Bayt. He mocked and he laughed at them. When the thousands of people saw how he mocked, when asked such a question, they realized, hold on a second, this person is apathetic. This person has no empathy at all when dealing with his people, when dealing with the Muslims in the lands. All of a sudden there was anger and aggression towards Ibn Ziyad. And likewise in turn, Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Slowly the anger and the resentment, slowly the guilt began to eat away towards the people of Kufa, and they began to revolt in retaliation. The passion of anger is a very powerful emotion. And it was to highlight to the people that the Imam Husayn alayhi salam, through his revolution, through his movement on the 10th of Muharram, it ignited anger and passion in the hearts of the people, and slowly they began to revolt against the Bani Umayyah. And there were many revolutions that took place after the 10th of Muharram. So this is the second consequence, the anger and the aggression that was directly created towards the Bani Umayyah. The third, and very importantly, was to highlight the movement of Imam al-Husayn highlighted to the people that there is a higher purpose in life. Spirituality was ignited in the hearts of people. At the time of Jahiliyyah, historians explain that the way the people used to live their lives was very simple. The leaders in the time of Jahiliyyah were the tribal leaders. Whatever the tribal leader says had to be followed. No one had the audacity to challenge the words or the orders given by a tribal leader. So for example, a tribal leader would say to his people, he would say, look, this person from this tribe insulted us, go kill him. Dare you say no to a tribal leader? It was part and parcel of their lives. It's how they lived their lives. Then, for example, one of them would say, as an example, he would say that this person has bought this from such and such person, go steal it from him. There the people would say no to their tribal leaders. This is how they lived their lives. The leading or the leaders of their time were the tribal leaders. The Holy Prophet of Islam, when he came with his revolution, he changed the whole demographics of how the Arabians used to live their lives. The Rasulullah created a system of hierarchy. You had the caliphate. And then you had, for example, governors who looked after certain cities. This political power was established in the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam. And it continued thereafter. When the Bani Umayyah came into power again, you found that what happened was, not only did they have political power, but they had power over the finances. So when they came into power, Jahiliyyah came back as well. And they controlled all of the funds, which meant that those people, or those tribal leaders in Kufa, there were about 23 odd tribal leaders in Kufa. The Bani Umayyah had control over them because they were able to give funds to such tribal leaders. Ibn Ziyad was able to stir up emotions against Muslim ibn Aqil. Why? Because he bribed many of these tribal leaders. He bribed many of them. Control the funds, control the hearts of the tribal leaders. This is how it worked. This method or this element of Jahiliyyah all of a sudden came back. They bribed many, and many stood against Abu Abdullah alayhi salam because of it. They say that when they controlled the funds, now, when you look at, for example, the common laymen who are under such tribes, they grew up in a generation where they saw their own leaders succumbing to the desires and the whims of the Khilafah and the governors. They saw their leaders sacrifice their conscience for worldly gains. Naturally, these leaders who were supposed to establish peace and tranquility within the cities, they were now engaging in criminal acts. They were now standing, for example, killing others, looting and plundering the wealth of others, all because the orders were given from the governors or from the caliph himself. If the caliph or the governor gave an order, if they were to oppose such an order, all of a sudden their lives would be at threat. They would be imprisoned, their assets would be seized, their family, their children would be under threat. They couldn't say no. And so they would engage in selling their religiosity, they would betray their religion just to be in good books with the governor or the caliphate. They say that Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, when Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When the tribal leaders sold and betrayed the religion of Islam, in their minds, there was only one thing that they cared about. They cared about their personal finances, they cared about their homes, they cared about the well-being of their families. And so whenever a choice was given to them, execute an order given to them by the governor or the caliph, or to refuse the order, you found that naturally they would follow and execute the order. Why? Because in return they would be rewarded heavily. If they were to stand against the people or the governors of their time and say, you know what, this is something that is not part of our ethos, then naturally their lives would be under threat. When they saw the massacre of Karbala, when they saw that Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was willing to give his life, and he did give his life, and he gave the lives of his family and his companions, they realized that why is it that the Imam alayhi salam gave his life in such a way? If the Imam had just given bay'at to Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he could have had dunya, he could have had, for example, all of the different pleasures of dunya. But no, he stands against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. For what reason? They could not understand this. Slowly they began to realize that living a life of corruption, living a life of humiliation is worse than death itself. Imam al-Husayn, through the 10th of Muharram, was able to re-establish the idea that there is a higher purpose than living a life of humiliation. These people, these tribal rulers, they accepted Yazid ibn Muawiyah to be their leader, and they had no opposition against him, knowing that he was a man of tyranny and a man of wickedness. When it came to Ibn Ziyad, again they succumbed to his pressures, knowing that he's a man of an unholy origin, and his lineage was very much known, that he was a son of an illegitimate. When Abu Abdullah famously he says, أن الداعي ابن الداعي ركز بين اثنتين بين السلة والذلة هيهات من الذلة. When he famously he says, the son of the illegitimate, the son of the illegitimate, this is famously known amongst the people of Kufa and beyond Kufa. It's not an attack towards Ibn Ziyad. This is something that Ibn Ziyad was known as. And so the people accepted the message of Ibn Ziyad and the movement of Ibn Ziyad because they knew that if they were to object and oppose Ibn Ziyad, naturally they would all be killed. When they saw the movement of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, the first question they asked was why? Why would a person give his own life for this religion when we have never even thought of giving our lives for this religion? Naturally, they began to think for themselves. Akhlaq developed within their hearts that it is best for us to establish peace and tranquility and justice within our lands, even if it may be by giving our lives, the way Abu Abdullah gave his life. The movement of the Tawabin, the movement that came afterwards, all of that was based on the movement of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, that there was a chance to establish justice within the lands, even if it meant giving our lives. Abu Abdullah, through his entire movement, taught the people the true understanding of death. That death is not the finality of the human being. It's just the beginning of the human being. Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyah, when he turns to Abu Abdullah, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, preserve your life for God's sakes. You're going to stand against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. You don't have the men to fight. You will be slaughtered. Preserve your life because that's wajib. Abu Abdullah responds beautifully. He says, you're threatening me with death? What's death to us, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam? Death to the Ahlul Bayt was just the changing of clothes. And that's all it was. He says, you remind me of one of the jawab that was given by one of the tribesmen of Aus to his cousin. His cousin had embraced the religion of Islam. He followed the Prophet of Islam. His cousin came to him and he said to him, look, if you accept the message of Islam and the message of the Holy Prophet of Islam, then nothing but death awaits you. He said, so be it. Death in this state, there is no shame, there is no guilt, there is no regret. To stand in opposition to degeneracy and a life of sin and licentiousness, to die in such a state is very much worth it. Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, he turns to Hur, he says, if death is our fate, then so be it. Because through death, Imam alayhi salam recognizes that through death, his mission will continue. There's a reason why the Holy Prophet of Islam came forward and he said, Husayn minni wa ana minhu. That his message will live on through the sacrifice of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Many a times the Imam alayhi salam came forward and he said, hayhata min adh-dhillah. That a life of humiliation is worse than an honorable death. And he was very much willing to give his death. These were the three ramifications of Karbala. And through these three, naturally the people began to stand against the Bani Umayyah. You find, for example, when Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, very interestingly, he stands before Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad looks at him and he says, who are you? He says, I am Ali ibn al-Husayn. He says, I thought they killed Ali ibn al-Husayn. He says, no, they killed my brother who was also called Ali, Aliyun al-Akbar. He says to him that Allah killed him. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam responds beautifully. He says, Allah did not kill him, the people killed him. Allah yatawaffa al-anfus hina mawtiha. Allah takes away the souls of the people when they are on the brink of death. Ibn Ziyad responds, he says, you dare speak to me in this way? He turns to the Sayyaf, he says, oh Sayyaf, stand and strike his neck. اضربوا عنقه. Strike his neck. When he is about to strike the neck of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, naturally Zainab al-Kubra stands up. And she says, Yabna Ziyad, hasbuka min dima'ina. You've shed enough of our blood. How much more blood do you want to shed? He says, Wallah, Ibn Ziyad, if you wish to shed his blood, then kill me first and then kill him. Imagine there are thousands of witnesses. When they see the bravery of Zainab, Ibn Ziyad, he recognizes that there is no power in his hands in this moment. And he slowly walks away from this. He tells the Sayyaf, he says, move back from Zainab. Leave them. These were the power of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Their movement meticulously, every word, every action they performed, it dismembered the political power as well as the religious power of the Bani Umayyah. It dismembered the whole foundations of the Bani Umayyah. On the 10th of Muharram, there's a narrator who comes forward and says that when we gathered the bodies and we placed them in the sands of Karbala and we lined them one after the other, he says, فَوَاللَّهِ لَا أَنْسَ زَيْنَبْ بِنْتِ عَلِيِّ ibn Abi Talib. He comes forward and he says, Wallah, I will never forget Zainab, what she did on the 10th of Muharram. وهي تندب الحسين عليه السلام, when she began lamenting when she saw the body of her brother Abu Abdullah. تنادي بصوت حزين وقلب كئيب, when she cries out with a heavy-hearted voice, a grief-stricken voice. What did she say? He says that she began to cry out, Wa Muhammadah. He said that whenever they heard the voice of Zainab cry out these words, they too began to cry. When she cries out, Wa Muhammadah, Hadha Husaynun bil Ara. O Muhammad, Ya Rasulullah, this is Husayn that has been left and abandoned in the wilderness. Murammelon biddima, a person who is drenched in his own blood. Muqatti'ul a'adha, and his limbs have been severed from his body. Mahzuz al-ra'si min al-qafa, and his head has been separated from his neck. Maslub al-imamati wal-rida, and his turban has been looted and his cloak has been taken away from him. وَبَنَاتُكَ السَّبَايَا, and your daughters have been taken as prisoners. They say that they are dragged towards the city of Kufa. When they enter the city of Kufa, Shimr ibn Dhil Joshan, he makes sure to embarrass the women of the Ahl al-Bayt, and he enters the gates of Kufa at the break of dawn to make sure that the people, they place their eyes on the women of Ahl al-Bayt. They say that the captives, when they entered the city of Kufa, the people of Kufa, they began to cry when they saw the state of the women and the children and the captives. When they come to halt, Zainab looks towards her right and she looks towards her left. Then she begins to say, she says, ماذا تقولون إن قال النبي لكم? What are you to say if your prophet stood before you and said to you, he says to you, ماذا فعلتم وأنتم آخر الأمم? What have you done, and you are the best of nations, the final of nations? What have you done بإطرتي وأهل بيتي بعد مفتقدي? The moment I leave this world, the moment I left this world, what did you do to my family and my what did you do to my family and my kin? Minhum usara, and you've made my family, some from amongst them, prisoners. Wa minhum dhurriju bidammin, and some of them you have slaughtered and left their bodies abandoned in the sands of Karbala. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Everyone all together. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. يا حسين ماتم الحسين.
Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn. सूरह कहफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है? खून आँखों से बहाता है, खून आँखों से बहाता है, ये सर किसका है? जिस तरफ जाता है बाजार में सर अकबर का, जिस तरफ जाता है बाजार में सर अकबर का, उस तरफ देखता जाता है, उस तरफ देखता जाता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है? खून आँखों से बहाता है, खून आँखों से बहाता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ सुनाता है, ये सर। चलते चलते जो सकीना कहीं गिर जाती है, चलते चलते जो सकीना कहीं गिर जाती है, खुद को नेज़े से गिराता है, खुद को नेज़े से गिराता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ सुनाता है। जब भी दाखिल किसी बाजार में होते हैं हरंग, जब भी दाखिल किसी बाजार में होते हैं हरंग, पहला पत्थर यही खाता है, पहला पत्थर यही खाता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ सुनाता है, ये सर। रात होती है तो मासूम सी एक बच्ची को, रात होती है तो मासूम सी एक बच्ची को, लोरी नेज़े से सुनाता है, लोरी नेज़े से सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है? सूरह कहफ ये पढ़ के कुरान की आयात सरे ज़ैनब से, पढ़ के कुरान की आयात सरे ज़ैनब से, ध्यान लोगों का हटाता है, ध्यान लोगों का हटाता है। ये सर किसका है? सूरह काफ सुनाता है। ये सर किसका है? सूरह काफ। ये सर, ये समा काश न देखे कोई ख़ाहर इसकी, ये समा काश न देखे कोई ख़ाहर इसकी। शिम्र जुल्फों से उठाता है, शिम्र जुल्फों से उठाता है। ये सर किसका है? सूरह काफ सुनाता है। ये सर किसका है? सूरह काफ सुनाता है। ये सर मीर सज्जाद नहीं था कोई वारिस इसका, मीर सज्जाद नहीं था कोई वारिस इसका। इसको हर एक सताता है, इसको हर एक सताता है। ये सर किसका है? सूरह काफ सुनाता है। ये सर किसका है? सूरह काफ सुनाता है। ये सर किसका है? या हुसैन।
अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाय या अमीरुल मुमिनीन वलियल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैकी या फातिमत ज़हरा सय्यदत निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाय या अबा मुहम्मदिन अल हसन अल मुज्तबा, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाय या अबा अब्दिल्लाह अल हुसैन व अला अली इब्न अल हुसैन व अला औलाद अल हुसैन व अला अस्हाब अल हुसैन जमीअन व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहु। अस्सलामु अलैका या मौला व इब्न मौला या गरीब अल गुरबा या मुईन अज़्ज़अफ़ा'i वल फ़ुक़रा, अस्सुल्तान अबुल हसन मौलाना अली इब्न मूसा अर्रिज़ा, कुन शफ़ीउना व शफ़ीअ वालिदैना फ़ी यौमिल जज़ा, वफ़्फ़क़ना अल्लाहु लिज़ियारतिका या मौलाय वरज़क़ना अल्लाहु शफ़ाअतिका फ़िद दुनिया वल आखिरा। अस्सलामु अलैका व अला उख्तिका फ़ातिमतल मासूमात जमीअन व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहु। अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना या हुज्जतल्लाहि इब्नल हसन या साहिबज़ ज़मान सय्यदी अल अमान अल अमान मिन फितनतिज़ ज़मान मिन शर्रिज़ ज़मान। अस्सलामु अलैका या खलीफतुर रहमान व या कअबतल ईमान व या इमामिना व इमामल इंसी वल जान। अज्जलल्लाहु फरजक व सहलल्लाहु तआला मखरजक व ज़ुहूरक व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहु। बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। अल्लाहुम्मा कुल्ल वलियका इब्नुल हसन सलवातुका अलैहि व अला आबाइहि फ़ी हाज़िहि स्साअति व फ़ी कुल्लि स्साअ वलिय्यन व हाफ़िज़ा व क़ाइदन व नासिरा ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتئه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات.